we will start the meeting. Steve Saunders is out, and so Peter, as alternate member, will be a voting member. Everybody's in agreement with that? Perfect.
Even if we disagree about the rules.
Well, Danon's an alternate member also, but I think we talked about the fact that Peter would be the alternate one,
Right.
Dan would be alternate.
Yes, because that means you'd have two votes.
Yeah, right.
Right. We call that the George Bailey.
Yes.
He's on every committee, so he gets votes all over time.
That's right. That's right.
We call that the George Bailey. Okay, so the primary purpose of tonight's meeting is to finalize recommendation votes for the 2024 warrant. And so the select board went through this process last night, and in so doing also made a decision about which warrant articles the budget committee would make recommendation votes on. Glad to report that they heeded the budget committee's advice, and I think the TIF district was the only one that the select board said no. Originally, this group said, hey, we should, and the select board agreed. I'm going to pull up. Just trying to think the simplest list to have in front of us here. Town administrator report that has the list of the warrant articles needed recommendation. Is there anything that anybody needs or wants to discuss before we get into recommendation votes?
I think maybe school board. 29,000 budget. And they approved it. Two warrant articles, nothing serious. But the thing that's kind of interesting is how they phrase this. It's about a 5% increase over last budget. But they phrased it as the difference between the default budget and their proposed budget. It's something like 2.5% greater than the default budget. And so they're touting as 2.5. If we did that, our operating budget 2% increase.
Figures lie and liars think.
Yeah, that was I looked at the presentation. Yeah, that was the kind of like the headline presentation.
Yeah, the headline is 2.5% increase. It's actually. And they're not lying.
But the wrong basis.
They're not
It's the
lying.
wrong basis for the percent increase.
Right.
Well,
That story is wrong.
well, no, if you don't approve that budget. It's the budget.
All budgets have 5%.
Sounds like somebody's dog.
And another 1%.
But it's another 2.
Yeah,
Yeah.
turn it
Not
down.
Winston.
I'll start by turning it
Our default budget.
down. Scott, there's some feedback coming through your microphone. I don't know what it is. It's like voice feedback. It's like white noise feedback.
I'll go on mute.
Okay.
Sander.
Salt spreader.
Yeah.
I am embarrassed. Like I
tell you, I'm coming down with a shovel.
yeah.
Don't tell them the lumber people. Apparently their transfer stations, they're not doing it.
No assaulting.
No, they're not providing.
Yeah.
Because people were loading up trucks.
We had that happen in Barrington. Okay, so we'll go down through the list. The first, there will be a couple of notes on each one, probably. The first article is the library bond. So the select board decided last night that the cash on hand number from the foundation could include commitments from the Friends of the Library and the Historical Society. And the reason that's important is because it will reduce the bond number. The reason the select board made that decision is because it's cash that they have on hand, but it's in an investment instrument that doesn't mature until after deliberative session, but before the vote. And so they have made a commitment to transfer those funds after the instruments mature, but it won't be before deliberative session. So it won't technically be cash on hand for the foundation until then. But the select board said that's as good as cash on hand for the purposes of the warrant article, which again, the risk is if you show too much of a cash on hand number and you don't realize that, then there's a gap between the total project cost, the bond amount, and the donation amount. In the first year, they included the entire pledge amount in the warrant article, which was crazy. And when I was here for the second round, I put my foot down and said that can't happen. That's unreasonable risk. So, anyways, the select board made the decision to include that. So,
It gets transferred to where?
to the foundation as part of their donation.
Oh, because it doesn't count as part of the foundation while it's in a CD?
No,
I don't
because they can't transfer the cash. The Friends and the Historical Society still hold the cash that they intend to.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That they've
It's not,
committed.
it's not the foundation,
Gotcha.
it's CD. They also have, at least one of them is in writing, the commitment to.
Okay, I got it.
And the one that's in writing is the Historical Society, which after the select board made that decision, the select board reduced the bond amount from $3,319,324 to $3,305,324. We expect that at deliberative session, it will at least be reduced 20 more thousand once the Friends issue their letter. And it could be more based on other cash collections that they have at that point. So that's the only new or different information. Is everybody ready to make a recommendation vote? Okay.
Can I make one more comment?
Yes.
To, if this bond doesn't pass, and this is probably the best deal we're gonna have on the library, there probably won't be a new library in our lifetime.
I believe that.
You know, because the foundation's committed to try 3 times, and if they don't, they're returning the money. So that $340,000 go back to the donors, and there probably would not be another 10 in reasonable time.
Amy, we'll record these roll call votes because we have 2 virtual. So without objection, we'll start with Bill,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
John.
1.5. See funny math.
That was a yes.
John's using his 1 additional no vote. So
So
it'll
actually,
actually-
Steve, no vote, that's not here, because that really changes our.
we talked about that a little bit. That's just how it has to work. If Steve's there after deliberative and changes, then his vote will be recorded there. And it might flip. Scott,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes. Yes.
okay, 4-1.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think what he's saying.
Okay, community center grant. No new information here. There was a new graphic if you want to see it, just updated for the 3 options because the 500,000 was pulled out. But this is most importantly contingent on receipt of the grant. Is everybody ready to vote?
When do we know about that?
Maybe March, maybe before, maybe not before. It was originally February, but they pushed it.
And if we vote yes, then it's going to be all of the town's expense.
No, it's contingent on the grant.
Okay.
Yep, the good question, and that's an important. And I'm trying to get the lawyer to agree to explicitly descriptive language saying contingent on the grant. We don't know if the grant spent.
And the grant is how much? 5?
No. Okay, everybody ready to vote?
Yep.
Okay, Peter,
With that condition is yes.
John, Scott,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes. Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, operating budget. No changes to the operating budget, just under 9 million. Default budget is 8,666,000. Everybody ready to vote? John?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes. Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Peter? Okay. Okay, the TIF district. I don't think that there's any new information here. The only thing that I'll share, and we showed this at the select board meeting last night, is just
The answers to my email, you never sent.
I know. Well, the problem with your email is a lot of your emails were statements, and you recognize that. Like, if I understand this right, so yeah, maybe I'll start there. So John is an excellent devil's advocate. And some it's because of his perspective, and some it's because we need to make sure that we're considering the contrary opinion to all the decisions that we make. And I think what John focused in on most about this proposal and this approach to achieving the vision of the town center is the risk that exists. And I won't speak for you, but I think the risk that the select board is willing to accept as far as, hey, we take this risk to achieve this vision is maybe a higher threshold than you're comfortable with. So I think if you don't recommend or if you don't like the plan, I think it's a difference in the gap of acceptable risk threshold. And the risk is that the town makes an investment in the town center, whether it be to preserve character or achieve the town center vision or for commercial development or redevelopment potential. And in 8 years' time or 10 years' time or 20 years' time, we miss the mark and don't achieve one of those. And that risk is possible. It's possible for a lot of reasons. On the Barrington Commons, the public park side, if the tax increment financing revenue takes a dramatic turn, the expected value that we have from things like the 40 units and the 80 units doesn't materialize for some reason, then we don't have funds to make that investment, which that's a risk that could exist. The broader vision of the town center, it could happen that we make this seed investment in making a place for residents and securing this property, and the rest of an organized town center isn't achieved because of lack of commercial development to support that. So now we just end up with this park and we don't have commercial development around it to sustain it and make the town center actually something. And then the last piece is the redevelopment potential that we secure by owning this lot. That might not happen. It might not happen in 5 years, 20 years, or ever, which means that there's unrealized development potential from this lot that we take away. So those are the risks. The reason, maybe going in those order, the reason that I've heard from the select board that that's an acceptable level of risk is because we know that we have, by the time the 80 units are done being built within the next 2 years, we'll have $450,000 of revenue from the incremental taxes to invest in this. So that will give us essentially 4 or 5 years to make improvements on this lot and in the broader town center, finish paying for the lot and making the improvements. And that is if there are no other investments. So it's possible that something could go completely sideways on the development that's already in the pipeline. We think that's unlikely enough that the making this commitment and having the exit strategy for buying the lot is sufficient to mitigate that risk. The commercial development. So, well, you guys can't see what I'm looking at.
So while you're looking for that.
Yep.
So year one is really 9 months. Well, in theory, it's a full year, but it really doesn't. We don't know about it until it's approved.
Right.
Years 2 and 3, assuming you get 450,000 from the 80 units, those first 3 years of 100% of that TIF money goes to buy a field.
Mhm.
And not including any money we take out for the school and public safety stuff.
Correct.
So 3/7, what's that? No, 3/7. It's like 32%.
Mhm.
Yep. So 32% of the potential revenue of this TIF district. 42. The 42
Yeah.
is already gone for a field.
Yes and no. Here's part of the piece that you're missing is that the incremental tax base is compounding, right? The amount that we capture in the first year is added to in the second year with any new value, added to in the third year with any new value in the fourth year. So it isn't a constant. So the 3/7 equation misses that point, that there's compounded growth in the tax increments. Does that make sense?
Only if you have development.
Right.
If you only have the 80 units, right? Let's just say you have the 80 units.
Right.
You don't have $1 from the TIF to put into the Ferris wheel until year 4 of a 7-year TIF.
I'll get to the timeline in a second too, but there isn't just those two projects, right? The Paul Thibodeau's project across the street from the cemetery is a mixed-use residential commercial development that is fully approved and the lot's cleared and construction will be starting. The Dove Development Group property, which is behind the Christmas Dove, they have right now a 1-year extension. So they are set to, start sometime within the next year, potentially. But those projects are in the pipeline regardless of if we do anything. To your point about the first 3 years, the agreement to buy the lot, which the select board authorized a letter of intent last night, is to have minimum payments of $150,000 a year so that the town could be concurrently buying the property and investing in it and investing in improvements. So it's not we're not waiting 4 years to realize any benefit other than a field.
Well, you kind of are because you're just spreading out that purchase price over the 7 years.
Right. Right.
In theory, if you said, I have all the cash today, it's the first 3 years I'm gone.
Right. So, yeah, you guys can see this now. So I had one of the meetings that I was really anxious to have, and I wasn't able to have until the last week, was the owners of the Knights, the new owners of the Knights property. And, because that's where, if there's an argument to be made for tax base and redevelopment potential, that's the property. Because they can't do anything else. They can't do anything more. They can't do anything else. The property where Phil's was, the parking lot next to the Knights property, it can't be anything because there's no development capacity on that lot. There's no septic loading. There's no well opportunity.
Unless you clean the land, right?
No.
No, they're just hidden.
There just isn't. That is developed to the maximum extent possible for septic loading, well capacity, zoning, setbacks, things like that. So that land needs other land in order to be developed. And what I've heard from the select board is that property with frontage on 125 and that visibility is more valuable to the town as far as commercial investment than this land that has no visibility. Commercial development on this property has to be a destination because you don't know about it unless you're going there. You don't see it when you're driving by and pull in. And so the opportunity to redevelop or add development on the more valuable parts of our commercial property along 125 is what this creates. Frank Jones is the other example, right? They can't have a dishwasher because they can't have a septic system. Let's give them the ability to maximize the development of that property. Nobody wants to see a restaurant sit vacant in Barrington or any building sit vacant in Barrington. And there are development constraints along the frontage of 125 because of prior development, septic loading, and well capacity. And we can develop this lot recreationally for self-guided leisure and sell, license, lease, provide easements, whatever, for development and redevelopment of budding property, which if this is developed, and I'll pull up the slides from the presentation that I made at the public hearing yesterday, but if it's developed to the maximum capacity, that opportunity disappears. And that opportunity disappearing is part of the reason that the select board wants to make the investment.
Does the redevelopment plan or vision or whatever you want to call it have the Knights in the depot building stay there?
Not necessarily. It would be their choice, right? So it wouldn't be the town to decide. And that's one of the reasons it was most important for me to have the meeting with the new owners to show them that, hey, this is what's possible. This is what would become possible. And it would be up to you to decide. So this is that redevelopment potential, right? So you see the entire Knights property and where Phil's used to be. This is shown as a conceptual redeveloped to a higher and better use than what exists there now. And this wouldn't be possible without septic loading and well capacity on this property. This is vacant over here. But what I wanted to show is, so this is in part what the select board wants to avoid happening for a number of reasons. One, because of the disdain for residential development, and two, for the reducing the opportunity for redevelopment on the more higher profile commercial properties in town. This was a proposal that came to the town in 2022, December 2022, 62 assisted living units and 32 residential units. What I didn't think about this plan until Tracy clued me into it is very frequently these facilities are operated in a nonprofit model that aren't subject to property taxes. And so this is a great idea from a tax-based perspective until it's a nonprofit and they don't pay taxes. And could Barrington benefit from assisted living? Absolutely. Does it need to be in the center of town? Maybe not.
Well, I guess there's two caveats to that. I know Tracy has a tax law degree, but it depends on what kind of nonprofit it is, whether it's tax exempt or not.
Right.
And the town could also negotiate a pilot in lieu of taxes.
If they're amenable, right.
So there is income tax-based potential with the elderly. It's not, if it's nonprofit, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Like there's,
it's definitely a sliding scale.
so it depends on what type of facility, what type of IRS classification, if they're 501c3,
Mm-hmm.
yes. But I mean, it's the same thing like the church.
Less guaranteed.
But like, it's just like the church, that was, if your use changes, then it becomes taxable. So
Right.
I don't think it's a hard, they wouldn't pay taxes because we don't know.
Right. And the residential development, I think, was a big part of that too. This is what is marketed with the property right now. 5 commercial buildings, which there's no interest in commercial development on here. But once you get commercial on the first floor, that gives you 91 residential units. And I think that either of those two developments eliminate the redevelopment potential of these properties and creates the kind of dense residential development that residents don't want. 125 is just past Knights right here.
Can I just break in? John, I have a question for you. Do you mind? Because I'm curious. Are you do you believe in the town vision that we need this lot of land for our town commons, and that you don't agree or concerned with the financing, or do you not agree with the fundamental idea that we need something like this?
I'm not in agreement on spending $1 million for what eventually could be a park. Potential future expenses that we have to cover. When we need money for fire trucks, highway department vehicles. I don't think we need gazebos and pickleball courts and splash pads or something like that without more guarantees. My biggest fear is that we buy this land for $1 million. We don't redevelop that land. And then in 7 years, when the TIF goes away, we have this park to maintain through taxes because we didn't get any development done.
You can extend it.
But you don't. So I would argue that the timeline for realizing the development potential that investing in the town center does is not 8 years. That timeline is forever. So this is an investment in the future of Barrington. That redevelopment might not happen for 15 years. The problem is if we don't make the investment now, it will never happen. And the unique part of the tax increment financing as a financial tool is that usually a TIF district is you take the risk up front and you need the development to happen to pay the bills. They bond a big project. They need the development to happen to pay the bond. What we're saying is there's enough development happening already that if we capture that value and invest it, we can make more and better development happen in the future. And we can dissolve the TIF district in 8 years after we make our investment and just let nature run its course with the development that happens. And we know that we have created, the goal is to create more and better development potential in the town center, consistent with the vision and the prioritizing properties that have frontage and all the rest. And so I don't think we would use a metric to say how much development have we gotten in 8 years. It is, let's make our investment over the next 8 years and let's realize that investment forever in the future. So that's a kind of a different.
I mean, I get the TIF. I'm in favor of a TIF. I don't think I'm in favor of a TIF in this situation with what the goal of the land is gonna be. If you had a letter from a developer saying, a letter of intent to redistribute that, if this became a TIF district where the town of Barrington could give all this land space use away, all power to it. I just
Right.
fear that this will end up as not going anywhere. And I know it's forever, but you also have to remember people are looking today, not tomorrow.
Right.
So if we were just buying the property outright without a TIF district, would you be more in support of it?
No, I wouldn't want to spend $1 million.
Okay.
We have infrastructure issues. We have a capital improvement plan for $30 million that has needs, wants, and the fairy tale stuff that we just, here's $30 million we need to spend on the stuff, but no way to pay for it other than you and I getting a bill in December that's not pretty.
No, and I understand that and I appreciate that and I respect that. I'm just wondering if we need to deliberate about this anymore or if we should just vote.
I agree with that point. Michael, you had something you wanted to offer, though.
And the way things are, Knights and Frank Jones are locked in and not able to go and do any further development, which means that their taxes that they're paying to the town are static. There's no way that we can get any more money from them. This TIF district expands the ability for them to go and, provide those expansions that they need for those properties in order to go and develop them and increase the amount of taxes that we can go and pull from them. Do you have an estimate as to how much more taxation we would expect after they go and improve those properties?
Yeah, it's a good question. So this development, if it were developed to look like this, as a for instance, not that, but this one, I can zoom in a little bit here. This could be $15 or $20 million worth of development between these three commercial buildings on those three lots. And the Knights just sold both of those lots for $1.1 million, and that's what they're valued at. And so I want to be very careful, especially for somebody like John. There is no plan for this to be developed that way, right? There's no letter from a developer. There's and that's the risk, right?
Correct.
The reward is that opportunity exists some point in the future if we make this investment. If we don't, and this land is developed commercially, and that there isn't any land able to be offered for redevelopment, then that opportunity doesn't exist 15, 20, even 30 years from now. Unless we have water and sewer at that point, which I guess is possible, but not probable. Does that answer your question, Michael?
Yeah, pretty much. The only other thing that's niggling in the back of my head here is that the town is taking a risk to go and make an improvement for those particular owners who have the potentiality of going and walking away with a landfall and on our dollar. And that's the only gripe that I really have with that.
That's a really good point. So I made it very clear when I talked to the new owners that the town was in no position to offer them something for nothing. Anything that the town would provide would be fair market value, would be used as the basis for providing it, whether it's septic loading or an easement or anything else. I'll say to that point though, and there's no active conversation about assigning a value or redeveloping, but TurboCam as an example, the town entered a development agreement with TurboCam and sold them lots on Redemption Road at various stages. And the metric the town used and has used consistently with selling land to TurboCam is we've sold them land at 50% of the fair market value. And part of that was in recognition of the infrastructure investment TurboCam made in building the road, Redemption Road, and of which the town still owns 2 lots out there. And that added value to the town's lots. And so land was sold to them at a discount. In 1 year, TurboCam pays more in taxes on one of the buildings than the purchase price, the fair market purchase price value of the property, right? So the value to the town in a real estate transaction is much less the transfer cost and much more the long-term revenue opportunities. And so I only say that to say it's possible that the select board if a developer comes in and says, we want to make a $20 million development on these 3 lots, will you sell us development rights from this lot that you own? It's possible that the select board says, if you'll do that, we'll cut you a deal on the development rights because that tax base is worth more to us than the one-time transaction of whatever. Or if it were me, I might try to negotiate some lease or license agreement where there's regular revenue from the use of the property and the tax revenue.
But I think one of Mike's points though is that this passage, you build a septic loading, all of that doesn't change the value of the Frank Jones building. It just allows them to have a dishwasher. So that doesn't change. The value of Knight's building doesn't change unless
until this happens, yeah.
Or they tear it down.
Or they add a building to the parking lot where the school buses go, right?
Right. But like the Frank Jones building and at status quo with the TIF, the value of those 2 don't change. Frank Jones doesn't change because they can put a dishwasher and have glass plates.
Right. Yep. The allowing redevelopment potential does not inherently change the value because they would have to realize some of that for the value to change. Yep. Great. Any other questions, comments, discussion? Okay, Scott?
Absolutely, yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Peter? No. John? Okay. 3-2. 20.
Thanks for saving me, not be the only one hated tonight.
Nobody's hating.
No, John.
Nobody.
We'll still hate you the same.
Nobody's
That's
hating.
true. Hey, we did agree.
What was the tally on that?
3-2.
3-2. Okay.
Same as last year. Now I wish it was 20 years.
We're
Steve, when you need him.
See, it's all about consistency.
It isn't. It's consistency is important.
So I gained a vote on the TIF, but I lost one on the library. Damn it.
Yeah.
It's a tough fight. I'd rather go the other way.
And can we vote on the next articles up through 36?
Yes.
Just
the note,
say all those are yes as a
yes.
group?
The only note is that the select board took the recommendation of the group and chose option 2, where 50% of each of them will be funded from unassigned fund balance. Any objection to doing 25 through 36 collectively? No. Okay, Michael, starting with you.
Yes. Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
The highway collective bargaining agreement. We'll start with Bill.
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Michael.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Community power, we're skipping the 2 revolving funds and the unused accounts. Can we do those together?
No.
Okay. Transfer station revolving fund. Discussion?
I just think that
Transfer station revolving.
if the cost skyrocket, then it should be the price of the bags at that time.
Increase the costs at the time.
Pay for usage.
That will have to be done anyway. I think the thinking here is that it won't happen all at once and it will slide down a little bit. That was my intention or that's what I was thinking, because whatever waste management decides to charge is going to extend all the way on. I think the idea of this was to make the transition a little easier, as opposed to trying to solve the whole problem with that one fund. But that's not a panacea. It's going to have to come up with other things as it goes along, but it will ease into that.
And the only thing I would say is that the having funds available gives us options. I think it's maybe more likely than not that in 2027, we are looking at doing our own transportation, either contracting separately than waste management or investing in equipment and maybe sharing services with another community. We pay right now $100 per haul. So it doesn't matter how much it weighs, $100 we pay to haul a can from here to Rochester.
Remind me where the money would be coming for this?
User fees.
And if we didn't do this, those user fees would go to.
The way this is structured is the first 225,000, which is what we collected in 2023. The first 225,000 would still go to the general fund. So that bill is paid as far as there's no change from a tax impact, but the select board, in conjunction with this, will gradually increase fees, where anything in addition to 225,000 by increasing the fees, they've targeted 20% a year, would be set aside in this revolving fund to either or both reduce the impact, the one-time impact. So instead of doubling or more the fees in one go around, we're doing 20% a year. So people are able to budget and gradually increase their costs. But also we're setting money aside so we can phase that in even a little bit more after 2027, or use the money for transportation. Close the loop on the cost. Waste management and the contract extension they offered us, they wanted to get to $500 a haul. They wanted to get to $500 a haul from Barrington to Rochester. And so having the money, if we end up with a couple $100,000 in the revolving fund, which I anticipate that we would, then we can spend that money on separate hauling contract, investing in equipment on our own, contracting with another community, or sharing services with another community. So it gives us that option as well.
But if usage goes up, we have more user fees, and that additional money would just go to the general fund.
The first 225,000 would always go to the general fund.
Is the surplus over that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if I'm paying for people's trash in 3 years.
The way this is structured, you shouldn't be
All right.
any more than you're paying now.
Okay.
You're subsidizing about 25% of the operation of that facility now.
So it's all user fee. There's no general funds.
Yep.
That are going to this extra.
Correct.
All right, that's fine. All right.
But I want to make a caveat, because you mentioned if utilization goes up. So let's imagine for a second that in 2 years' time, the utilization of the facility goes through the roof, and the facility needs to dramatically increase its operating costs, hire more people, have more hours, whatever the situation may be. The way this is structured right now is those costs would be picked up by the operating budget, right? Because all costs are in the operating budget, but the 225,000 is still fixed. And so if the operating costs increase dramatically, then the portion covered by user fees would decrease, right? Right now it's 75%.
We could also increase fees to account for an additional person above and beyond the 20%.
Exactly. And to do that, we would need to amend this article to amend that $225,000 number.
That's fine.
Yeah. Anyways, okay. Ready to vote?
I'm good.
Peter?
Yep.
John?
Yep.
Scott?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes,
Bill?
Yes.
Okay. Fire ambulance revolving fund. Questions, discussion? We pulled costs out of the operating budget that align with revenue source, increased to 100%. The tax impact is an $80,000 reduction in general fund revenue, which is reflected actually in the operating budget article as it will have it, because that's where we offset the revenue with expenses. So interestingly, the tax rate impact statement on this article is a little bit funny, right? Because this it would be duplicated. It would be in two places if it were here and in the operating budget article. That's where this document becomes really helpful.
Just take out your contingency.
Right. So if you see here,
That's fun.
this is where revenue is accounted for overall, and so this would be $80,000 higher if we weren't anticipating passage of this warrant article. And so when we go from this one to the per warrant article impact, it's the revolving fund isn't on here because it's picked up in this one, right? The operating budget, that 13 cents reflects the 80,000 in less revenue, even though there is more revenue. Does that make sense to you guys? Ready to vote?
Yep.
Ron? Scott?
Yep.
Michael?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Peter?
I'm torn on this one.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna say no.
Okay. What are you torn about? What haven't you heard? Just so I can make sure that people understand why there's a.
Well, I just think that, what we charge against, the revenue fund as it now exists is a little bit squishy, if you will,
Mhm.
where, certain expenses come out of the budget, certain expenses come out of the revenue fund. I'd like to see a set of firmer rules if we're gonna increase that. So that's really my concern is lack of discipline in what the rules are.
Yeah, well, I think the reason for the article is because those rules are being established where the overtime and the ambulance billing contracts, the two categories that were pulled out of the operating budget, are expected to come from the ambulance revolving fund. And the reason the revolving fund is better than the operating budget for that is because those costs are variable, right? We get ambulance bills for paramedic intercepts when we have more ambulance calls, right? And when we collect more revenue. And the overtime similarly fluctuates. And so I would argue that this does firm up more what the plan is for utilization of those accounts. Maybe not enough for you, but
Yeah.
Point taken. Closing the unused trust funds and capital reserve accounts. So this is the town hall capital reserve together. This is the town hall capital reserve. There's a road reclamation capital reserve that was a one-time project on Hall Road, and then the Tricentennial Expendable Trust Fund. So they all have small balances. They'd be transferred to the general fund, clean up our books. Everybody ready to vote? Scott?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Peter? John? Mark? That's all of them. So there's an advisory budget committee article. Wouldn't it be nice if the budget committee voted on that? The select board recommended it 5-0, the joint budget committee article. Yeah, I mean, it's not financial, but it's about budget committee. Shouldn't the budget committee make a recommendation about it?
Not financial.
That incidentally, Tracy's probably gonna amend it. That deliberative session would be 3-3-1.
But there's no
The one
financial
being-
impact. Yes, is there? And there's
The
no
one
doubt
being what?
that's the
Joint
metric.
combination.
That's
be a financial-
self-guided.
So three
Yeah.
school, three town, and the one
Otherwise, are we overreaching?
Combination.
Some would say that you would be.
at large.
I wonder how this group does feel though. Is there anybody that doesn't like the idea?
Like the Indian one.
The joint budget committee.
We used to do that
Right.
many years ago.
I think it should be.
Peter, you like
Oh,
it?
definitely.
John?
The only thing I wouldn't like about it is potential time commitments to have a joint meeting.
It will, the first year, I anticipate it will take a lot of coordination. Because we have to merge a process which is very detailed and discrete and a process which is very high level and cursory.
Yeah, I just think sitting in a 4-hour meeting on a whatever night does not interest me at all.
Maybe this is how we get John Morris off the budget.
It's a very.
Where's
When I move to Durham, where the taxes are gonna be cheaper once we have our Ferris wheel and teacups.
Yeah. One of the things about the school budget, is a lot of this is cost of the teachers. The bulk of it is the cost of the teachers, and that's contract. So there's, the real combination thing that I think is movable is services like miles the lots, and who gets the gas. Probably not huge differences.
But it's still coming out of our taxes at the end of the day. There's no,
Well, exactly.
right, like
Not exactly.
$20 in my left pocket, $20 in my right pocket.
the same
$25, correct.
Yeah, but the irritation to me is that with what the town does for the school, and then they can't share a facilities manager, they can't do this and they can't do that. I think we're getting screwed, to put it bluntly. And I just don't think it's a reciprocal agreement at all.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree with that, but like, us paying for the school bus gas is no different. We just take it out of our budget and put it there.
I mean, I agree with that.
Those things are kind of fixed. There's not going to be a lot of discussion. And the joint committee won't be able to discuss those things. Teachers are contracted, school buses are contracted. We can look at that. Gas, other stuff.
80 pounds of salt on the walkway.
Yeah, exactly.
Shovel, at the school department, wants salt, come shovel, clean the driveway, recess.
Scott, I know you like it. Michael, are you supportive of the joint budget committee?
In a manner of speaking, I'm thinking more of a hybrid model where the municipal, you would actually still have two committees where you would have, the municipal side come together as we do, and then you'd have the school side come together. And once those have been finalized, the two meet together and come up with a combined, proposal.
Conference, right? Yeah. Interesting.
I think the conflict there is time.
Of course.
Look at where we are now. We wouldn't have time to start dealing with stuff on top of what we've done.
Yeah. Not that it'll be recorded on the Warren article, but just curious how it goes. To your point about the wage increases, so I was looking at the school budget to try to educate myself a little bit. I saw that they have a line item for a merit pool for the administrative staff. It was like $56,000, and I expect that includes the SAU staff and the principals because their wages
I
were.
think it's mostly principals.
Oh,
And the assistant. It's principal and assistant principal.
I looked at the teacher contract and it looks like it isn't a fixed increase like percentage wise, but they have the matrix and the difference between the matrix. And it looks like on the high end, it was like a 3% increase, on the low end, like a 0.6% increase year over year for depending on where you are on their matrix. Was there any discussion about that? Was there any discussion how they arrived at a 5% merit pool?
There's no discussion.
Oh, okay.
I think the town lead.
It never comes to public, and I've never heard it. In all the school board meetings I've heard, they've never discussed that in detail, and their advisory budget committee does not address that.
Yeah, I wonder about the 5% merit pool. Like, who is going to decide? Is there intention to split that equitably between the staff? And if it is, then you'd think they would just be more transparent to budget it that way. A merit pool tells me that they want to give somebody, 6-7% and somebody 3-4%. But when would that decision be made, and who makes it? Because like I said, I think the leadership of the SAU are in the merit pool, because 5% to get to 58,000, 5% is like 1.1 million. And so that's more at least the teacher, the principal and assistant principal salaries. So.
And that's why having this committee would be useful, right? Because we can begin to have these discussions. I mean, I don't think that the school is rich and swimming in money, right? So they're still under the state average, which to me is amazing. But ultimately, the whole success of this comes down to who's on that committee, because we need to have people who are pragmatic and realistic and willing to work together.
Cool. Any other topics for discussion? Advisory Budget Committee.
What did the select board do with the funny math what was the vote on the funny math for the funding of the warrant articles?
They said 50% to be funded.
No, but what was the vote of the select board?
Oh, 5-0.
I vote.
Oh.
Unanimous. Yeah.
Do you guys ever disagree on anything?
We did for a moment.
Yeah, we did for a moment.
And then it changed.
But to that point about, because I know that you say this tongue in cheek, but there are people that believe that the select board are rubber stamp. I think what the process is different for the Barrington select board is the select board doesn't ever just encounter information and make a decision. The select board reviews information over a series of meetings. The proposal is tailored to the perspective of the select board. So by the time they make a decision, it's something that they can all get behind. And I think that process results in very frequently unanimous support from the select board, not because they're just a rubber stamp, but because the process has allowed them to provide input and feedback and change what is being proposed because of that. Do you feel like that's the way, Dan?
Yeah, I don't think we've ever made a decision in one meeting.
Right.
You're a great presenter. No, seriously, I think you present the issues very well.
And they change. And
Correct.
if you look at what originally comes up and what comes up on the final vote,
Right.
it's not the same because we've kind of worked to a consensus.
A great example is the letter of intent for the 13 acres. So the original deal included a $25,000 non-refundable deposit, and the purchase price was negotiated without an appraisal, or the purchase price wasn't based on an appraisal, or that wasn't factored in the due diligence. And so the select board meeting, the select board is actually, hey, this seems like a reasonable deal. And the select board got a lot of feedback at the meeting and after the meeting. And so we were able to renegotiate those terms where there's no non-refundable deposit and the buyer and the seller both getting an appraisal. So those are the kind of the feedback loop is.
What's the digit?
What digit?
On that
Purchase
land?
price?
Yeah.
The current price is $935. That's dependent on
What's the current
appraisal.
assessment of it?
$500.
If I
The
recall, sorry, go ahead.
It should be 100% of fair market value though, right? Or 90% of it?
It should be, but there are a number of problems. One, it hasn't been developed or changed hands for a lot of years. Two, it's in current use, which impacts the value, the fair market value. Three, there are not a lot of vacant commercial land transactions in Barrington as a basis for the town's assessor to apply a value. And so the assessor is not performing an appraisal of all 5,000 properties. They set metrics, base land values. Right. And so that broad brushstroke is better when there's a statistically significant amount of properties in that category, and much less accurate specifically when there's small amounts. So single family home, 2 acre lot, pretty good.
When did these appraisals due?
February 9th.
Is that before the roof session?
No, the recession is the 3rd.
So what if both of these appraisals come back at $1.2 million and the owner says, sorry, I want 1.2? How does that work?
The appraisal comes in at 0.6.
Or before that, yeah, exactly.
It's possible that the town doesn't come to terms on the purchase price for the property. And
Which screws up the whole TIF district thing.
It does and it doesn't. It basically goes back to what the TIF district was last year, right? Because the TIF district plan last year was more abstract, that, hey, we know things are happening. The biggest thing, if we don't end up with 13 acres and still have a TIF district, the biggest thing that we have is funding to invest in the civic use and open space that's required as part of PUD development in the town center. So Dove Development Group across the street required to commit 41% based on the variance that they received to civic use and open space. And we have zero money or plans to do anything with that, which is blasphemy because we told the developer that, well, they offered 41%. That's how we got to 41%. The regulations say 15 or 25%, depending on how much development is commercial and how much is residential. But the town and the developer came to an agreement where 41% of the land area, acreage land area, is civic use and open space. And so once they develop that, they're going to say, hey, this is your 41%. These are it's like 11 acres, 12 acres, whatever it is. So how crazy is it that the town has zero money and zero plans to do anything with that when the developer could have doubled the amount of development and tax base? Now, the zoning is set up that way so that it isn't super dense development and it's intermingled with green space and, opportunities for recreation opportunities in between and stuff like that. But if we have no way to pay for or do anything with that land, then why are we even taking, why are we even accepting rights to it?
See, I could get behind a TIF district for that situation if you did without this $935,000 that were.
Yeah. And so that was the TIF last year, and you said no.
Because it was 20 years.
Okay, so 8 years and no land purchase you get.
Correct.
If it fails again, we're probably not coming back with it. But I think the land purchase guarantees that there's a spot, central spot. The civic use and open space is abstract. I would not be surprised, we're on the record here, but I would not be surprised if the development that's conditionally approved behind the Christmas stub is redesigned. For a variety of reasons, that happens, but there's new land available that could be incorporated. The 41% is kind of an issue. And so if that gets redeveloped, then that opportunity loss.
When is our next meeting move?
Deliberative session,
Deliberative session.
immediately following deliberative session.
If there are any changes, we have to read them.
Right, yeah,
Yeah, only on articles that change at deliberative session.
it's gonna change.
That we voted on.
That we voted. Yep. Anything else, Scott, Amy, Michael?
As December goes, you want to get the first pickleball game in the court, and we can cool off in a splash pad.
I'll play pickleball with you.
You said merit pool for the school department fund. I was thinking swimming pool at the town commons.
Should we have a swimming pool?
Why not?
Let's make some money bet.
Durham's got one. We should have one if we're turning into them.
Motion to adjourn then?
Good idea.
Now you can shut this off.
That's better. I'll second. Now we can talk.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Amy.
Bye.
The bill went up this year, right? You running again?
We still record.